watched it, but only the first episode. That one got scary after a while. One of the best shows I've ever watched. Decent show. Never got around to watching it. Sounds interesting. But all of these are essentially Netflix shows. These are just some of the shows that might interest you and keep you glued to Netflix, but they might also be tempting tech giant Apple to loosen its purse strings and acquire it. Yes, Citi analysts have recently sent a note to clients saying that there's a 40% chance that Apple will buy Netflix. So what really triggered this thought? Apple will have $252 billion in overseas cash available to repatriate. It could either make small acquisitions like Shazam, like they did a short while ago, or tread a very different path. Is Apple buying Netflix? Does it even make sense? To discuss that, we're joined by Karl Kaufman. He's the founder and CEO of American Dream Investing and the author of one of the pieces that we actually came across on this particular topic. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to start off by asking you whether this deal makes sense according to you.
I don't believe so. Apple historically has always made small contributions, and to buy a company like Netflix, which is trading around 206 right now, it seems like it's a little overvalued, a little overpriced for them.
Right, Karl, but it becomes interesting considering how much Apple has invested over the years and how it's been eyeing the video streaming, the video content business, so to speak. And of course, Netflix is also now not the sole player in the game, even when it comes globally, not just America with what's happening with Hulu and the other players, but even when it comes to Amazon Prime, and they're on a content acquisition spree all over the world. Do you think this would make sense considering those scenarios?
Apple likes to do things in-house with this kind of thing. They've already committed $1 billion. They're partnering with Spielberg and Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston, I believe. And I think they're really going for their own Apple Studios, if you will. At least that's what it seems like. And to raise the white flag and go buy Netflix just doesn't seem like the right move for them, at least right now.
Right, Karl, and also considering, of course, this was based on a Citi analyst prediction. Does that make sense? They've said there's a 40% chance of this going through. This isn't the only, merger or acquisition, so to speak. They've also considered, other M&A candidates, be it Tesla, Hulu, EA, Take-Two. There are, a lot of players in the game. But do you think the rationale of actually using that $252 billion that are actually coming back into the system, does that make sense for Apple to actually go on an acquisition spree, so to speak?
Look, I'm an Apple shareholder. I'd prefer them to put the money into the company, either research and development, building better and new iPhones, share buybacks, stock dividends. That would make investors happy. And I think with all that cash, that's what a lot of companies, not just Apple, are going to be doing. There may be some more mergers and acquisitions. You see Disney with 21st Century Fox. But Apple, they just don't do these kind of things. That's not to say they won't in the future, but I really don't believe that they would spend $75 billion or whatever it would take to buy Netflix, which has negative cash flow, spending tons and tons of money at developing new content, when Apple can take some of their own money and develop that content and control in-house what gets made.
That's an interesting point that you bring up, Karl, because there was a Bloomberg piece last month preempting something like this, and it actually talks about how there are several advantages for Apple, and it's a win-win situation for both companies. One being that Apple acquires a library of content that would instantly make it competitive with Amazon. Netflix adds $10 billion in annual revenue. Apple should perhaps be able to scale that fairly quickly, and that the acquisition would immediately make Apple the world's leading internet television network, worth over 90 million members in 190 countries. Because, if you actually go through what what Apple's done when it comes to the TV streaming service. Apple TV didn't really pan out the way they'd envisioned. Fire TV Stick is doing fantastically in markets, in emerging markets like India, and I'm guessing all around the world, even with what Google did with Chromecast. But Apple TV didn't work out. This could perhaps resurrect that project if they were to acquire so much content. Would that make sense?
I'm not sure. I mean, I have an Apple TV and I can use Netflix on my Apple TV. So I don't know why Apple would really need to have all that content within their own library, especially now that Disney is going to be pulling their content, maybe Fox's content as well from Netflix. So Netflix is going to be losing a lot of their content, and they're going to have their original content, which is very good. I love Stranger Things, but I just don't see Apple needing this at the moment to play the game. I mean, there's tough competition, don't get me wrong. Amazon Studios is doing really well, but I think Apple wants to get in the game themselves and do their own thing. It could always change, like I said.
As a follow-up question, it becomes interesting because obviously this is a hypothetical scenario. This is a prediction that's got, that's piqued the interest of everyone at Wall Street and around the world. But if Apple was to pass on the opportunity and perhaps not go ahead the way you're predicting, do you think this would be an interesting space for perhaps someone like Amazon to come in? Because I know this whole war that's been brewing between Amazon Prime Video and Netflix. Would it make sense for someone like Amazon to come in and perhaps acquire a company like Netflix?
It wouldn't be unheard of. You just look at Amazon buying Whole Foods, and now I think Gene Munster started a rumor that they're looking at Target. So Amazon likes acquisitions, so I don't see why they wouldn't. They're also doing a very good job of developing their own content. I think they're spending several $billion for original content as well. The way things are playing out now, I think there's going to be just competition in the arena. I think we'll have Amazon, we'll have Apple, we'll have Netflix, and we'll have Disney, and they'll all be separate. And maybe as a consumer, it's a little annoying because you have to subscribe to different services. I think the real losers will be the cable companies because people will cut the cord and go over the top.
Right, Karl, and it's interesting the way the scenario is playing out, obviously also with Disney pulling off their content from these platforms. But, just to get an understanding of this, since you've been tracking this space for a while, do you also think that the figure that was cited, which is nearly $75 billion, could that also be a stumbling block, considering a lot of estimates seem to suggest that that's wildly overpriced, that being one, and two, also the fact that perhaps, of course, this is going at a premium, and also perhaps Apple hasn't made such big acquisitions in the past. Beats was perhaps their biggest, and that was around $3 billion. We saw what they did with Shazam, it was a much smaller figure. Could this number of $75 billion plus be a stumbling block as well if this deal was to ever go through?
Yeah, I think so. $75 billion is nothing to sneeze at, regardless of if you have $250 billion coming back overseas, from overseas. So it seems like a massive, massive purchase for what at the moment is a small but growing part of their revenue. I mean, Apple makes most of their money from the iPhones and developing those. So they're looking to increase their services business. Buying Netflix would certainly boost that significantly, but $75 billion worth? I don't know if it's worth it, and I don't see them doing it.
Absolutely, Karl. Thanks so much for joining us live from Florida. Really appreciate you taking out the time. And for all of you watching, thanks so much for watching. And if you're actually watching any of these shows, well, then maybe very soon they will be available, on your iPhones, in-house, maybe in the Apple Music or the video app. But for now, I'm going to go watch my favorite show. Thanks so much for tuning in.